This is a real story. I never thought Tinder could lead me to something like this. Claire was just swiping through Tinder one rainy evening, looking for a little distraction, when she came across Max's profile. His picture was striking. Him, standing confidently in front of a dimly lit, neon-lit bar called Real Base. The glow from the sign cast an eerie yet captivating hue on his face, making him look like he was part of some secretive, exclusive world. His eyes sparkled with an unspoken promise of adventure. His bio was simple but mysterious. "Come find me at Real Base, I'll be waiting." Something about the profile intrigued Claire. It wasn't just his looks, although he was undeniably handsome, but the mysterious nature of the bio. Real Base wasn't a place she'd heard of before, and there was an air of secrecy surrounding it. It wasn't the kind of bar she would typically go to, but that sense of mystery tugged at her curiosity. It felt like a chance to step into an adventure, a secret she could share with no one else. So, without overthinking it, Claire swiped right, expecting a normal, casual conversation. To her surprise, Max immediately matched with her, and their conversation took off from there. He seemed charismatic, confident, and smooth, just the kind of person who knew how to charm without coming on too strong. It all felt so easy. They talked for a couple of days, Max expertly keeping the conversation flowing while keeping her interest piqued. There was an underlying tension, though. Something about him seemed a bit too perfect. But Claire dismissed it as part of the thrill. After all, she was just meeting someone for a fun night out. How bad could it be? Max's text messages were always timed perfectly. Never too eager, never too distant. Each response felt tailored to exactly what Claire needed to hear, making her feel like he understood her better than most people she'd met. Their conversation quickly moved beyond casual small talk, diving into deeper topics and shared interests. It was almost as if they had an unspoken connection. Max never asked for too much. He let Claire reveal herself, and when she did, it felt like he was always there with just the right comment to keep the ball rolling. One evening, after a few days of texting, Max suggested meeting up at Real Base. The idea of meeting in person wasn't out of the ordinary for Claire. She had met people from Tinder before, and though it was always a bit nerve-wracking, it was part of the excitement of dating in the digital age. But with Max, it felt different. The way he invited her to Real Base wasn't like the typical first date suggestion. It felt like an invitation to something more, a secret, a special experience that only a few knew about. Despite her slight hesitation, Claire felt a pull she couldn't ignore. Max's invitation seemed genuine, and his mysterious tone made it all the more enticing. She agreed to meet him there, figuring that even if things didn't go well, she'd at least experience something unique. That's when the anxiety started creeping in, but she pushed it down. After all, he seemed so sure, so confident. It would be fine, right? When Claire arrived at Real Base, she immediately felt like she had stepped into another world. The entrance was tucked away behind a narrow alley, a barely noticeable door leading into the dimly lit space. The moment she stepped inside, an eerie chill washed over her. The bar was unlike any she'd ever been to, dark, secluded, and almost suffocating in its ambiance. There were neon lights flickering, casting strange glows that seemed to warp the space around her. The hum of electronic music played in the background, but it wasn't the kind of upbeat energy she had expected from a typical bar scene. Instead, the atmosphere was heavy, almost hypnotic. As Claire walked further into the bar, she couldn't help but notice the patrons. They didn't look like the usual crowd you'd expect at a trendy, underground venue. Many of them sat still, not engaged in conversation. Their eyes glazed over as if they were in a trance. Others stood in place, staring into the air as if caught in some kind of hypnotic hold. The entire room seemed disjointed, as if time had slowed down for everyone there except for her. The sense of being watched grew stronger with each step. Claire checked her phone nervously, wondering if Max had stood her up. She shot him a quick text. "I'm here. Where are you?" She waited. Nothing. The longer she stood there, the more her unease grew, but she couldn't leave. Something kept her, rooted to the spot, something she couldn't explain. As Claire scanned the room looking for Max, a tap on her shoulder made her jump. She turned around and there he was, Max, standing before her. But something was wrong. Max was taller than she remembered, and his features, though still handsome, seemed sharper, more angular, as though his face had been sculpted from shadows. His smile was wide, too wide, and his eyes, which had once seemed warm in his photos, were now unnaturally dark, almost black. "Glad you made it," Max said, his voice low and smooth, but with an eerie, mechanical edge. It was as if the words weren't quite his own, as if they had been programmed into him. He didn't sound like the confident, playful man she had been texting. This voice felt predatory. Claire tried to smile back, but it felt forced. She didn't know why, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. His eyes lingered on her for a moment too long, and she felt her stomach tighten. It was a feeling she hadn't had in years, like she was in the presence of something otherworldly. Without waiting for Claire to respond, Max grabbed her hand and gently tugged her towards a private section of the bar. His grip was cold, far colder than it should have been. Claire glanced around as they walked deeper into the bar. The other patrons remained frozen in their positions, staring off into the distance, completely oblivious to her presence. It was as if they were stuck in some kind of trance, bound to the place, unable to leave. The air felt heavy, oppressive, and Claire's unease only deepened as she followed Max further into the mysterious and claustrophobic space. Max led Claire to a secluded booth at the back of the bar. The area was dimly lit, with only a few candles, flickering on the table, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. The temperature in the room had dropped, but it wasn't the kind of cold one would expect from an air-conditioned bar. This cold felt different, unnatural, almost as if the warmth of life itself had been drained from the room. Claire's breath came out in small clouds as she sat down, and she pulled her jacket tighter around herself, trying to shake off the creeping chill that seemed to settle in her bones. Max sat across from her, his smile never wavering, his eyes still black and unblinking. There was something predatory about his gaze now, as if he was studying her every move, watching her reactions closely. Claire tried to ignore the growing unease gnawing at her and focused on him. "So, what is this place? It's so different," she said, trying to make small talk and distract herself from the strange energy filling the air. Max didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stared at her for what felt like an eternity, his smile stretching wider. "You'll understand soon," he said cryptically. There was something in his tone that didn't quite fit the words, like they had been rehearsed, or worse, like they had come from somewhere else, somewhere darker. Claire shifted in her seat, feeling like she couldn't quite breathe. It was as if she was sinking into the booth, the air thickening around her with every passing second. She wanted to get up, to leave, but she couldn't move. It was as if the room itself was holding her there, rooting her to the spot. Max leaned in, his face now just inches from Claire's, his cold breath brushing against her skin. "Want to see something special?" he asked, his voice taking on an eerie, almost hypnotic quality. Claire froze, unsure of what to say. Something in her gut screamed to run, to get away from him. But at the same time, she felt a bizarre sense of curiosity, like she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. Max's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment she felt like she was drowning in them, unable to escape. Without waiting for an answer, Max grabbed her hand. His grip tightened, around her wrist, cold and unnatural, sending a jolt of panic through her. She tried to pull away, but his hold was unyielding, almost like iron. A strange energy surged through her as if her very body were being pulled towards him, against her will. The room began to blur. The walls distorted, and the air grew colder. Still, Claire gasped for breath, her head spinning as the world around her seemed to melt away. Her body felt weightless, as though she was being pulled into the fabric of the bar itself, sinking deeper into an abyss she couldn't understand. Everything went black. When Claire opened her eyes again, she was no longer in real base. She wasn't even in the same dimension. The bar, the neon lights, Max, they were gone. In their place was an empty, cold space, a void that seemed to stretch on forever. It was darker than anything she had ever seen, and in the distance faint whispers echoed around her, voices that sounded familiar but twisted and distorted. Max stood before her, grinning with a wide, sinister smile. "Welcome to my world," he said, his voice no longer human. Claire stumbled backward, her heart racing in her chest as she took in her surroundings. There was nothing around her except darkness, nothing but the oppressive, suffocating void that seemed to swallow up all light and sound. Max's smile, still wide and unnerving, never faltered. He took a slow step toward her, his eyes black and endless, pulling her in. "You shouldn't have come," he said, his voice low and cold, echoing in the vast emptiness around them. "You're mine now." Claire opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her body was frozen, trapped in this cold, horrifying dimension. The air felt heavier with each passing moment, as if the very space itself was closing in on her. Then, from the darkness, Claire began to hear whispers, soft at first, but growing louder with each passing second. She recognized them. They were the voices of the other patrons from Real Base, their distorted echoes filling the air. They had all entered the bar just like she had, but they never left. They were trapped here, just like her, their souls consumed by the darkness that Max controlled. Max grinned wider. "Welcome to Real Base. No one ever truly leaves." Just as Claire thought she couldn't bear the weight of the darkness any longer, her phone vibrated in her pocket. She fumbled to pull it out, the screen lighting up in the endless black void. It was a notification from Tinder. "New match Max, he's waiting for you at Real Base." Claire's heart sank. No matter where she was, no matter how far removed from the world she once knew, the app was still running, still pulling in unsuspecting victims. Max's game never stopped. The matches never stopped. And Claire realized, with sickening certainty, that once you entered Real Base, you were part of a never-ending cycle, a trap for anyone who swiped right. Max's voice echoed in the distance. "It's your turn now, Claire. You're just like the rest. Welcome to the game." And that was when Claire truly understood. There was no escaping once you made the match. You were trapped, part of the darkness, forever bound to the twisted world of Real Base.